We're back on In Focus tonight. The Western Cape government has been criticized for procuring 50 luxury German vehicles meant for law enforcement, but the vehicles have been used for, or haven't, shall I say, been used for months. They are parked at the Louw Traffic College for safekeeping. For more on this, now joined by the acting head of the department in the Western Cape's Urban Mobility Ministry, Yasir Ahmed. Yasir, good to have you, and thank you very much for coming on tonight here on In Focus. Please confirm for us the number of vehicles that were procured. Is it 110 cars, and what was the price tag?
Good evening to you and good evening to the viewers. Yes, we did procure the vehicles, and it is in the region of 110. Not all of those vehicles have been delivered, but we have received a number of the vehicles, and those vehicles are now in the process of being fitted with the technology to allow them to be used as mobile officers by our provincial traffic officials on the Western Cape roads. So those vehicles are received by us, a large portion of them, and we are now in the process of preparing them for being used by traffic officers.
Yeah. Why were they allowed to sit for 12 months at least without being used?
Well, it's not been 12 months, and unfortunately we're sitting with a situation now where we just had a perfect storm of supply chain issues, of delivery issues, of space issues at our government motor transport trading entity, which came together to delay the preparation of the vehicles and getting these vehicles out onto the road. But let me assure the citizens of the Western Cape in particular and citizens in general that these vehicles, it does not mean that our provincial traffic officers do not have vehicles to keep them mobile, to allow them to do their work. Our officers do have vehicles that are currently in use. Our planning is just always in 3-year cycles, and these vehicles were part of a planning cycle of replacing vehicles for this particular client of our trading entity. The provincial traffic vehicles are replaced every 2 or 3 years. With COVID, of course, there were some challenges with the supply chain in the automotive industry, and South Africa, of course, was also impacted, and in particular a fleet owner like GMT that has something like 7,000 vehicles in our fleet. Yeah. We were certainly impacted. And it's not just the supply of the vehicles, it's also the supply of the technology that goes into the vehicles that we fit after we receive the vehicle. I mean, if we receive the family sedan, whether it is a BMW, a Polo, or a GTI, that vehicle is received as a normal sedan. We then have to still fit it with the lights, the sirens, the branding to make it look like a provincial traffic vehicle. And then also, very importantly, with the technology inside the vehicle that allows our traffic officers to be effective in doing their jobs on our roads to keep our citizens safe.
So how true is it that you procured, firstly, these vehicles in advance because there were considerations of price, that if you procured them a year later, they would cost more, but two, you did so, but then later found out that these are new versions of the vehicle that will not be able to fit the old technology that used to fit in the car, which then brings us to the question of what was their proper planning?
Yes. Well, our planning certainly was as good as it can be. In hindsight, of course, this is not ideal. It's not an ideal situation for us. We are reviewing our supply chain processes, our suppliers. I think also very importantly for us as a trading entity in the Western Cape government, we are not going to cut corners when it comes to supply chain with providers and cutting corners with our procurement processes. So if a process has to take a little bit longer because we want to ensure that there's compliance with supply chain legislation, we are going to do that. And I'm going to emphasize again, it doesn't mean that these vehicles are standing still and therefore our traffic officers are not able to do their jobs. they still have the existing vehicles which are still very much fit for purpose with the technology in it. But the vehicles that we procured as part of this replacement cycle needed to be fitted with the latest technology. And in our discussions with the engineers of BMW, they highlighted that there may be issues which would not put them in a position to ensure that we will get the warranty. And it was for that reason that we said to the engineers of BMW that we would then rather procure the appropriate technology that will allow them to ensure that we get the warranty of the vehicle, so that if any electrical fault, for example, happens as the result of technology that we fit into these vehicles, we did not want to lose that warranty and then lose the vehicle as a result of an electric fault that causes the vehicle to burn or something like that. We therefore said we will rather do this by the book in terms of procurement, work with the engineers of the vehicle manufacturers to ensure that not just that the vehicle is going to be under warranty, but also that our officers who use these vehicles are, of course, safe in the vehicles when the technology is applied.
Yeah. So, from what you're saying, you're saying it's not that there are no vehicles right now for the officers, which means there is no need for these new vehicles right now. There will be a need in 2 years' time. Is it the efficient way of allocation of resources in terms of prioritization of government spend to say, well, let's spend this 94 million now, but we are only going to see the benefit of it in 2 years, as opposed to spending the 94 million now on education, housing, and healthcare that will give us benefit now?
Well, when it comes to the provision of fleet services to our provincial government clients and some of our national clients, we, of course, as a trading entity, the old government garage or government motor transport, as it is called now, we are a trading entity that does not receive funding from government. We receive funding through leases of the vehicles in our fleet to provincial and national clients. Now, again, I want to assure your viewers and our citizens that there's no wastage involved here. These vehicles will be utilized. The vehicles that we currently have in the fleet that have been issued to provincial traffic officers are being utilized, and they will be utilized to the full effect so that we can draw as much value out of those vehicles that are currently allocated to our clients. The vehicles that we are talking about now that were procured forms part of a planning cycle to replace those vehicles further down the line. Because when a vehicle is received, that process of fitting the vehicles with the necessary technology does have a lead time. Even a vehicle, a normal sedan that we procure for a client just for general mobility between government facilities and serving the citizens, the turnaround time from when that vehicle is received by the trading entity to when it is allocated to our client is about 2 to 3 months. Now, in that time, the trading entity does not charge the client for at least amount for that vehicle. So that period that we allow ourselves to fit the vehicles with the necessary technology, for example, for an ambulance, it takes about 9 months to a year to convert a normal panel van into an ambulance. And the period that we normally have for converting a normal family sedan into a provincial traffic vehicle is about 6 months to 9 months. So unfortunately, as I said at the start, we were just faced with a perfect storm coming out of COVID-19 of supply chain issues that affected the entire automotive industry and also other industries that provide us with the technology that goes into the vehicles that has now caused this delay in getting the vehicles converted. But those vehicles have not yet been formally allocated to the client in this case, which is provincial traffic. Those vehicles are still on the books of the trading entity, but as soon as they are ready, they will then be allocated to provincial traffic. It's just that in this case, because of space constraints that we had at the government garage, at GMT, that those vehicles were parked and are being parked at a facility of provincial traffic.
So what does that mean? Does that mean 94 million did not come out of government?
Well, GMT is a trading entity. So it means that we do not receive money from the fiscus. It's a trading entity that is self-funding. We, as a trading entity, we generate revenue by leasing vehicles to client departments, provincial government departments, and also national clients.
Right.
And that is how the entity sustains itself. But in that process of receiving the vehicle to when we allocate the vehicle and it starts to generate lease revenue income for the trading entity, that's, the entity is not generating revenue during that period, but that period is planned for. And like I said, we still have the vehicles that we previously allocated to our clients, the ambulances and the provincial traffic vehicles, that are ensuring that those necessary and crucial services are still being performed.
So I want to understand this properly. You're saying government motor transport leases to departments, but does the government motor transport purchase the vehicles?
Yes.
So you have spent the money to purchase the vehicles and you lease them to departments. You don't begin to recoup that money up until the point where you are leasing those vehicles to the various departments.
That is correct. So we recoup the money of the cost of those vehicles from our clients through the leases over what we call the useful life of the vehicle. Now, the useful life of a vehicle, of course, depends on how that vehicle is utilized. If it is, for example, an ambulance, you can well imagine an ambulance or a provincial traffic vehicles does quite a number of kilometers per day. So while a warranty for the vehicle would be in the region of about 5 years and 100,000 kilometers, an ambulance or a provincial traffic vehicle does that number of kilometers, 100,000 kilometers, within 2.5 years.
Yeah.
So in that period, GMT as a trading entity will then recoup the initial capital outlay for that vehicle through leases that are charged to the client.
And when will these particular vehicles be in use then? You're saying for a family sedan like this, it takes about 6 months. So are we likely only going to see them in use next year?
Well, no, the process, of course, is well advanced. There are, let me perhaps just give a sense of the processes and the technology that is fitted into the vehicle. When a vehicle is received and it has to be converted into a provincial traffic vehicle, there is the fitment of the reflective markings that makes the vehicle look like a traffic vehicle, and that citizens can identify this is an official traffic vehicle that's allowed to pull me over on a national road. There's the branding that must be fitted onto the vehicle. Very importantly, the lights and the sirens, tracking devices in the vehicles. Two-way radios are critically important because that's the lifeline for a traffic officer. The mobile networks, of course, have got dead spots where a traffic officer, if he or she is only using a mobile phone, would not be able to contact the control center. And that is, for the safety of the officers, the two-way radios that are independent of the mobile networks. That's the lifeline for a traffic officer. And while the vehicles that we're talking about now have largely been fitted with the lights and the sirens and the vehicle markings and the reflective markings and to some extent also the in-vehicle technology, like a tablet that goes in the vehicle, a printer that allows the traffic officer to print fines, the two-way radios, that one contract. We are in the process of finalizing that supply chain process, and within the next 2 to 3 months, those vehicles will be fully fitted, ready to be allocated to provincial traffic, and those new vehicles will then hit the road.
Yasir, I appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on and making that clarity. Yasir Ahmed, acting head of the department in the Western Cape Urban Mobility Ministry.